So the hugely disruptive technology I want to talk about, and no one is allowed to laugh when I say this out loud, is fusion energy. So if you talk to people in the fusion community, the standard line is that fusion energy is 50 years from whatever day you ask, and always will be. But there have been a number of really interesting things happening in that area of science over the last 5 years that suggest that maybe a little bit more rapid progress is about to be made. So Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, that's the home of the world's largest laser, the National Ignition Facility. And the purpose of the NIF is to create the conditions for laboratory ignition. So it uses a process called inertial confinement fusion, where you use the X-rays created by the laser to compress a tiny capsule of hydrogen fuel to the point where it creates a self-sustaining fusion reaction. And while the researchers there have not yet achieved sustained gotten past break-even, where the energy out of the capsule is more than the energy into the system, they've made over the last few years remarkable progress in creating much more conditions that are much more favorable for ultimately achieving ignition at NIF. But what's happened in the community writ large that I think is very interesting is there's been a large, relatively large number of startup companies that have been created over the last decade in the area of fusion energy technology. And ARPA-E even created a program, the Alpha program, to fund technology development in the area of fusion energy. And these companies are looking to really speed the cycle of innovation in the technology, the drivers that you utilize, and the pathways to fusion ignition and sustained plasma burn that you need for a true fusion energy solution. So in contrast to these big projects, which tend to take many, many decades, like the ITER project in France, or then even the quest for ignition at NIF, these companies are working on a several-year timescale to really drive our understanding and the capabilities of the technology forward. So I think it's an interesting area to watch, and I think the amount of ambition and energy that these new companies have injected into the mix is really quite interesting. So with that, I'll stop.
Can I just,
sure.
It's just a moderator's prerogative. I'd like to ask just one question, Kim. You actually have a long background not only in energy but also in national security.
Yes.
And the narrative of energy and national security really being, that nexus of the issues coming together is one that has a long history.
Yes.
I'm curious whether you see that continuing through, for example, in the work in fusion or in other areas. Is that narrative still alive and well and something that you're motivated by and something that the labs are motivated by?
Definitely. I think it's a critical problem, and I think you see many manifestations of it. One is the large presence of military folks in a conference like this. Just from a simple question of logistics and supply chain, for the military working around the world, different types of renewable energy and more sustainable energy technologies are critically important. They're still critically worried about climate change and the impacts that will have on migrations and conflict and other things around the world. And for the folks in these laboratories, being able to put technologies out into the community that are not only sustainable and helping to reduce our reliance on carbon-based fuels, but don't contribute to international problems. So the two security labs have an enormous focus on non-proliferation activities. So in addition to renewable energy or fusion energy technology, they work on more proliferation-resistant fuel cycles for nuclear energy, for example, and different ways to secure materials and disposition materials to diminish the risk worldwide from nuclear power activities. So, thanks.
So next I'd like to invite up Eva from Ciel&Terre to come and speak about what you're doing. Let me help you with the slides. Now that we've figured it out, he says. Let's have a look. That's you, right? Okay, all yours.
Thank you. Hi everyone, I'm Eva Polybols with Ciel&Terre. So what are we doing? Floating solar. Why? For us, solar is a disruptive technology for renewables. And what we wanted with floating solar is to address some of the challenges of solar. First challenges is you need a lot of space, you need a lot of footprint if you want to do large-scale solar system. So a lot of ground. Where is the ground? Do you want to be on perfectly good graded agricultural land, natural land? It's very difficult to actually find industrial land for a good large scale without conflict of use. Same for rooftop. It's difficult to get really adapted rooftop for solar. So the idea with our system, because we come from the traditional solar industry, where do we find land with no conflict of use, with a good energy intensive consumption point close to a grid connection point, which is very important. And this is why since 2009 we shifted to floating solar that solves some of these issues of obviously conflict of usage of land. For example, we're working a lot with the water utilities, with the ag, with the irrigation plant, with hydro dams, and I will list a couple of them, to be able to provide floating solar solutions that solve that issue of space, but also is able to have synergies with the water conservation world, because I think this is one of the big issues as well of the next decades is how do we save water? And these evaporations savings are well in mind of everyone, as well as how do we enhance solar production? How do we get better generation out our plants? Just a quick introduction. So we made innovation simple. To work well in solar, you need very simple and straightforward product. This is why we made a giant solar Lego, literally. That took quite a years of R&D, actually, to get to that and work with different institutes. But what we wanted to have is something extremely simple to deploy, safe, where you don't need to excavate, take off trees. You can work in very limited space. And this is why we started mainly in Japan with some island nations, where land is at a prime, where access is difficult, where you have a lot of inland water bodies, and you would be surprised, and where with a crew of 15 people with absolutely no tooling, you can install 100 kilowatt peak a day of solar. And this also obviously interests a lot of public, but also the army, is how to deploy quickly a generating solar facility. And I think this is very important for the future of solar. Obviously, you always start small, and then you see how you can deploy it on a large scale. We have a couple of examples. For example, on the left, you see the largest installation on a water drinking reservoir in the middle of London. Where can you put 6.4 megawatts in the middle of London of solar? You know that more than anyone else. You can't. And those reservoir is a pre-storage reservoir that serves all the water distribution in London. So this is a perfect of both worlds, because this provides electricity for the wastewater treatment plant that serves all water for the London area. And this is a perfect, secure reservoir in the middle of the London area. The second one is with Orlando Utility in Florida. So they have a lot of stormwater, and we're looking at a 20 megawatt system with their cooling pond for their thermal plant. A lot of industrial, chemical, thermal plant, nuclear, they need cooling, so they need water. So those reservoirs will be here for hundreds of years, and we will not change the purpose. This is to supply water. But in addition of supplying water, you can supply more electricity. The last one, Yamakura Dam, and I'm going to come back to that, is an hydro reservoir, an hydro plant reservoir. So the best of both worlds, again, we're all talking about storage. The easiest way to actually store electricity is water, and I'm going to come back to that. So we have a lot of different applications. This, for example, you see a winery on the left, drinking water reservoirs, irrigation, minings. You see in a lot of countries, if you take out gravel, you create man-made reservoirs that are great to be able to install floating PV, aquaculture pond, industrial ponds, and hydroelectric dam. What's exciting us in the future is we install our first installation on an hydro dam, and this is the best way for us to be able to do electricity storage. So the PV power plant will produce during the peak day most of the solar, shade the water, provide evaporation savings, and those savings of water will be able to be turbined at a later stage, on the peak, on the evening, or at night. So this creates an alternative for the peakers to be able to produce electricity. For example, for hydro, the great synergy is you can switch off the turbine and produce more electricity whenever you want. And the solar is here to produce in the peak during the day and be able to have less hydro during that time. So they complement each other very, very well. And this is why we're working a lot also in Europe, in Southeast Asia, and in China with a lot of hydro dam because the synergy is obvious. So you can see some of the pictures there. And obviously something which is very exciting as well is the new financing of the solar installation. And Ivan will talk about it a little bit later, but cryptocurrency, how to work better with utilities, how to be able to monetize some of those kilowatt hour which literally come from savings water, how to monetize a gallon of water which is saved through those kind of system. And I think also it will solve a lot of problem with new financing model. We work a lot with community solar because lots of those reservoirs actually belong to government, cities, public utilities, either electrical or water utilities. And those parties do not usually finance their own system, but for community solar, it's a great asset locally to be able to create those community solar program, those CCA, where you can literally invest, have crowdfunding, and have local power serving your territory. And this is why a lot in the US of the CCAs are looking at that. So this is what is exciting for us in the future, is to really have different models serving both industry, solar, water conservation. And obviously one of the good advantages also for solar is the gain in generation, because obviously, as you know, solar do not like to get hot. So the air-water exchange under the panel and for the electrical cable provide extra generation on the solar. So all those extra kilowatt hour of solar help efficiency of those solar plants. And obviously, the good thing as well is with this kind of system, this is HDPE floats. Literally, when you want to dismantle it, we shred it, we wash it, we recycle it. The pond will look exactly the same 20 years after than before we put it in. And obviously, everything is food grade and water drinking compliant. So we have the least impact as possible, which is one of the main issues for solar. And also we help with water conservation and water quality, because this will reduce algal growth and a lot of problems that we have here in California with water bodies. Here you go.
Thank you. So it's really fascinating. Just one question. What would you say is from a sort of, I guess, a technical standpoint, what's the sort of hardest part, or what's the special sauce that Cielentera has developed that you think has sort of solved a sort of unique challenge in getting this to work?
Yes, so I think is when you need to think about innovation, we spend a lot of time to thinking how to make it extremely simple. And I think a lot of people do not think like that. But to be able, and this is again, we'll come back to the financing system, because there is a lot of way to finance innovation, prototype, but financing goes three ways. You finance innovation, you finance projects, and you finance the industrialization of your solution, so the go-to-market, which takes time. And I think the biggest challenge was to make something very simple and something that can adapt to any technical characteristic of the reservoirs. For example, the site that you see here, on an emergency drawdown, this water level fluctuates up to 120 feet. So what you need to come up is a good anchoring system to be able to allow this kind of water variation. And obviously, after it's standard to have a system that is compatible with most of the standard panels, inverters, cabling. And after it's convincing, all the banks, the EPC of this world, that this is actually easier than ground mount. And that takes time, and working with the utility, it's a very bureaucratic world. Everyone is very, obviously, the first priority is safety of dams, safety of water quality. So this takes time, but I think for the past, now we've been working on that for the past 8 years, and it's been gaining momentum, mainly in Asia, Europe, and now the US, because you have so much space here that I think the new solution to get with floating solar is getting there. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, and then I'll turn it over to Evan from Chai Energy. Do you want to? Sure. Oh. Need a hand or?
Ooh. Let's see where it is. Yep, there it is. All right, I'm gonna briefly introduce Chai, but tell you a little story behind the company and some of the things that we're seeing in the marketplace, and then I'll kind of lead into some blockchain discussion. So I'm one of the co-founders of Chai Energy. The company was actually started in 2012 during the time when Southern California Edison was actually deploying their smart meters. I had worked at Edison on a corporate strategy program around environmental programming for the utility, but part of the smart meter deployment, we were looking at ways at the utility to get information to customers and how to save energy, save money. That data is incredibly valuable to the utility. Today, it actually is driving the real-time energy market in California. We've heard a lot about demand response over the years, microgrid solutions. It really does allow us to have things like virtual power plants. We're able to track energy usage in real time against real-time markets, and that is paving the way for time of use rates, which will become mandatory very, very soon. So a lot happened off of that little meter there. Now, I felt it was very interesting that we were showing slides in the beginning of this presentation around investment money into clean energy. And I think the utilities actually have spent a tremendous amount of money on clean energy technology. You can point to the smart meter for that. Over $100 billion was invested in California over the course of 5 years, starting in around 2008. And prior to that, a tremendous amount of investments in California as well around clean energy tech. So a lot of money being spent, but what's going on with VCs and startups? Well, I think we can start the question, is there really a market for startups in the clean energy space? And I think if you look at the solar market as a whole, I think we're just at the tip of the iceberg there. Renewable energy is certainly, we have a priority on it. What are the technologies that are really changing the game? Last year, there was a lot of discussion on battery systems. Tesla certainly leading a lot of that discussion. The technology's been somewhat delayed to market. Tesla is getting, I would say, their large commercial systems out, big installation in Australia, and a lot of problems down there, but we're not really seeing the residential system shipping today. But I think that's things that are happening. And what are the reasons for that? I think there is a barrier to market, and commercialization is very challenging. So not to digress from Chai, but I think we have some big challenges that we are facing. So how does blockchain kind of fit into this whole thing? And where is the energy space going to go? Well, we were able to create an app that worked off of digital smart meters to show customers how much energy their home was saving and the cost of that energy. That's innovation off of technology that was built by the utility, and we're able to play in the real-time energy market today. We're able to integrate with battery systems, electric vehicle charging systems, thermostats, solar inverters, and we can show people, energy consumption. Residential homeowners can actually be a part of the power grid now, participating in demand response. That makes every home essentially a virtual power plant in itself. And commercial buildings and residential buildings are also capable today of storing power and also generating power with solar systems and so forth. So you have to start asking the question, what happens next? And so I think it's very neat that we're having discussions today about mobile storage, which is vehicles driving around in the power grid, and those things can connect. But we have to be able to communicate with those systems. The utilities today are talking about putting more infrastructure investment into technologies for two-way communication of distributed energy resources. It's something that CHAI is certainly on the forefront in that discussion, because we are the customer engagement technology, and I think that we're going to be able to find ourselves in the near future to be able to interact with the grid in new ways. But what is the grid? And I think this is where blockchain is really going to start to come up in discussion. So cryptocurrency obviously is all the rage, and I think now the world is beginning to understand what blockchain is somewhat, but it's still kind of, it's a little taboo, because truth of the matter is I don't think people really understand what the technology is actually can do or what it actually does. But in all sense of utilities and I think blockchain actually is a transaction platform that takes out the middleman. And what do I mean by that? So cryptocurrency can replace banks. No longer do transactions have to be validated by 4 banks so if you swipe a credit card, bank has to verify that there's money somewhere, and it gets written onto a system that is pretty archaic these days. And blockchain essentially allows you to do transactions, cutting out the middleman. You can do direct transactions. Same thing with energy. So we're looking at different ways to leverage blockchain technology. We've partnered with a company in Australia that's leveraging blockchain that perform demand response events. And it began to open up some discussions internally. Do you really need a utility to send you power bills? And it's an interesting idea and something that everyone should really think about. So in some ways, we're able to look at the real-time energy market, and we look at spot pricing. Why can't customers directly access the energy market and buy cheap power when they need it, right? So today you could probably argue that the way to transact doesn't exist. I think blockchain in the future could actually be that transaction mechanism. So all someone really needs is a cell phone and a way to communicate. And we have digital smart meters and an infrastructure that's doing the bean counting at kilowatts. And so why can't someone just buy power out of the spot market? Why do we need utility bills to sum up 30 days of energy usage? So the technology's here. Whether or not it becomes commercialized, I think that's something that, that's the 5-year discussion, maybe even 10 years. But there's certainly technology out there that can change the status quo. I think when people see energy and how they use it and consume energy, whether it's they're charging their electric vehicle, maybe they get that high energy bill, their behaviors begin to change, whether they begin hating on the utility or there's some sort of reflection of themselves, and we see that customers want options, and today there's just not enough options, but there are technologies out there that can change the way that people consume energy. So anyway, I can kind of pause there. I think we have some questions, but I'm speaking on 3 more panels about this technology and blockchain, so it'd be great to get you guys out to those panels. Thank you.
So we have a few minutes for discussion. Evan, I just want to key off what you're talking about there and actually go a bit deeper into the customer side. Because I think a lot of the things you talked about, particularly around blockchain, are kind of predicated on the idea that customers are going to want to take more control and be more engaged in their energy usage and make more choices actually around technologies to adopt and so on. How's your view on that changed over the last, say, 5 years or so? You used to work for Southern California Edison. You've been through kind of a lot of the changes that, in terms of ways to engage consumers. How have you seen that change over the last few years?
Yeah, thanks. Good question. So I think you have two types of customers. And unfortunately, I don't know if we have customers that are fully aware of the option that might be in front of them today. So most people, when they look at their energy company, they want service, right? So they come home, they want to make sure their lights turn on. And then it's not until, personally, I think they might receive a high energy bill that they begin to think about energy efficiency, or, wow, I might need solar now, or perhaps they buy an electric vehicle. And so we see that. We see customers' attitudes change when they make an investment into something like an electric vehicle and how they consume energy. When rates are changing, we see customers get a little bit concerned, but usually there's an economic driver to it. And then you have kind of the leading or bleeding edge customers that are they're green, they believe in sustainability. I wish everybody believed in that. Unfortunately, I would say everybody in the room probably here believes a little bit in that, so that's great, but we need more customers like that. I think as technology evolves, the way we live, changes as well. Homes are becoming more efficient, not, and I hate to say this, I wouldn't say it's a customer first driver. I think technology is kind of leading some of the way there, but like LED light bulbs have become like the new standard, right? And of course there was a push to get that technology in front of people, but now it's very hard to find other types of lighting. It's become the norm. So energy efficiency becomes adopted, through, I would say, kind of innovation in those regards. So Kim, it's just dying to say something here. So.
I was just, since you brought up I think you made a really good comparison to the way energy efficiency was taken up by consumers. Mm-hmm. And so if you think back to when energy efficiency became a focus, right, I have to speak because it came out of a national lab, so this came out of Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. Art Rosenfeld and his colleagues realized the tremendous amount of benefit you could derive just from thinking about efficiency. And that led to this whole regime of standards and regulatory framework. Similarly for LEDs, I worked at DOE for a few years. The government doesn't do very much in energy. Private sector really owns that, but they can help drive behaviors and incentivize behaviors. So putting incentives in place for people to understand the benefits. So I'm a consumer and I'm thinking, I don't want to work the real-time energy market, but if you can help me understand what the benefit is and incentivize me in some way to do that, that sounds like a great idea. So if you need beta testers, I'll be your gal.
Everyone download Chai Energy right now.
Yeah, that's great. And that ties back into what Jonathan from Berkshire Hathaway was saying on the main panel, is that a lot of these things are going to be driven because people make different choices, and they're going to choose electric vehicles, and they're going to choose LEDs because it becomes the obvious choice. Can I just bring it back to the money again, actually? So we talked a little bit about financing, and I think it sort of came up in each of your talks actually as well. Does it ring true to you all that the trends in financing have changed? Is that something that you've experienced in your businesses or in your kind of professional lives? And is it getting easier to find money for innovation, or is it getting harder? Eva, do you want to take that one?
So that's a very good question, and I actually have different experience between different countries. And I would say, for example, in Europe or in the US, we have a more like traditional way to do it a little bit. For example, as I said, for us, we have 3 ways of seeing financing. as really innovation at the very first stage, so the prototype, the certification, and goes through literally all testing phase. So you find a lot, I would say, of financing for those and a lot of help from governments and everything. After you have finance, you need to finance those first projects, because how do you go to market? You need large scale financing project of those. And for example, we find much more luck in Asia. So literally we started our big scale market, not in Europe, not in US. We actually started in Japan and in Asia to be able to finance those. And then after there is a financing of being able to develop your company, go to have an industrial solution, go to market, and also have enough cash, because those big projects, if you work with utilities and if you're waiting for the utilities to adopt your product, yes, it's a 5-10 years timeline. So where do you get the money? And this is where you have different corporate investment or capital venture or crowdfunding. But the thing is, this is usually where also the small startup are losing control, because this is literally where you get taken over by larger companies, which can be an end game. It just depends what you want. But I think also this is what we don't see that many startups in the renewable energy world. It's because a lot of big companies actually absorb them at the very early stage, and they don't get to that development stage.
Kim, do you have a thought on how the funding environment has changed in your world?
Well, it's changed a tremendous amount. As I said, this increased focus on novel types of public-private partnerships has become a big focus for us, which I think is a great trend, a way to derive maximum. There have been these very large-scale public investments in early-stage research and technology, and building these large-scale facilities that are really enablers of the kind of innovation we're talking about. And the push to really make a return on those investments for the use of the broader community, I think, is a great trend. The second one is sort of companies or institutions with special purpose or a special perspective on their investments. University of California Office of the Chief Investment Officer was the institutional partner in the Breakthrough Energy Coalition. And our Chief Investment Officer has spun off a couple of innovative venture vehicles specifically focused at this community and trying to develop venture vehicles that enable the transition of technologies out of the laboratories into the private sector. So I think people are being more creative and looking beyond the normal lanes where you would seek funding, because none of them really have enough money in them to make this industry go in the way we need to do it. So much more collaboration, I would say.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to?
Yeah, just one more. I think the CEC has done a great job in California getting some of the startups off the ground. There's some great grant programs as well in California that are really driving some of that startup innovation. It's the thing that I struggle with a little bit is like the next step. So to your point, you kind of can fall into this death by pilot scenario with the utility pretty quickly. I mean, I think you'll sit in a pilot for 18 months to see if your technology is feasible, and the truth of the matter is the technology is feasible. The big question is, how do you commercialize that on a larger scale? I'd like to challenge the industry and think about ways of bringing the right technology into the space quickly so that we can meet our goals faster and move on with some of these discussions. I mean, I feel like over the last 10 years I've been having the same discussions in energy, and it's we're moving the ball forward, but it's just very, very slow. So again, the tech is here, I think, in a lot of ways, and we need to apply it to real world problems, and I hope we can get there together faster.
Thanks, and that's a great note to end the panel on, actually. So let's all hope we can move even faster, whether it's floating solar or blockchain or even fusion. Let's hope we can get there sooner. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.